I run nights by choice. Daylight turns the interstate into a circus. Merges that aren't merges, rubberneckers, every lane a different religion. At night, the road stretches clean and the white lines give you something like honesty. The downside is the loneliness. The upside is the quiet. For years, I took the trade without complaint. Then 1 month on the Western Plains, I started seeing a man at the rest stops. Not walking, not waving. Standing just inside the line of trees like a comma at the end of a sentence. A pause that had learned to breathe. The first time was nothing. I pulled into a state-run lot past midnight. Concrete pads laid out like parking spots for giants. Sodium lights making everything look the same size. The building sat in the middle. Bathrooms, vending machines, a map with sun-faded colors behind plexiglass. I swung my trailer wide and backed into a slot far from the only other rig. No cars. No RVs. Wind pressed low over the grass like a hand. I killed my lights and the night came back cautious, as if deciding whether it had room for me. My clock said I had 30 minutes for a break. I set the brake, logged off duty, and leaned back. The smell in the cab was the usual. Coffee old enough to have an opinion and whatever cleaner the company buys in drums. But there was also that thin ribbon of prairie air slipping through the vents. I was almost asleep when I saw him in the mirror. Not a shape that moved, just the suggestion of outline where the light didn't land. He stood at the edge of the little copse that the highway department had planted to make the place look like a park. He didn't step out, didn't fidget, didn't swing his arms like people do when they have to pee and are deciding how public to make it. He just existed, the way a smudge exists on a lens. My first thought was simple: security. The state hires people sometimes to walk the lots, but security wears reflective vests and carries flashlights they can't resist using. This one wore nothing I could read at a distance. The trees kept him half-written. I told myself it didn't matter. I shut my eyes. When I opened them again, 2 minutes later by the clock, the smudge was gone. Fine. My body let go of a fist I hadn't noticed was clenched. I sat that way until my 30 was up, rolled out onto the highway, and forgot him by the time the speedometer found 65. The second time was 2 nights later. Same highway, different rest stop. The kind with picnic tables bolted to concrete pads and a metal playground that creaked in the wind like memory. I parked under a dead light so the darkness felt chosen. Habit had me sweep the mirrors once before logging off. Left convex, left flat, right convex. On the right, near a thicket of scrub that passed for landscaping, the smudge again. Closer this time, 1 step out from the trees, enough that the light caught something pale at the face and then lost it. My hand went to the horn and then stopped. You don't blow the air horn at 2 a.m. unless your options are limited to bad and worse. I watched for a full minute, then opened the door, stepped down, and listened. Truck stops have noise even at night. Reefers cycling. Air brakes popping in their sleep. A faraway generator doing its metronome. Rest stops, when they're empty, have a different sound. Wind finds edges in the concrete and sings where it can. Grass hisses. The big light over the bathrooms buzzes like an insect that can't die. I heard all of that and nothing else. The figure didn't move. There are all kinds of good reasons not to walk across a dark lot toward a figure that refuses to be known. My favorite at that moment was, I had nothing on me but a mag light and the bluff I keep where most guys keep a mean dog. I stood on my step rail and yelled, "You good?" The word bounced exactly once and then decided not to come back. The figure stayed put. I waited, counted to 20, then swung back into the seat like I hadn't done anything brave or stupid at all. When I checked the mirror again, he was gone. I put it in the file labeled coincidence and drove on. The third time, the file needed a new label. I'd been rolling 7 hours straight through a weather system that couldn't decide between wind and rain. The sky had turned the color of steel, then left that idea behind and went to ink. My wipers choreographed a tired dance I'd learned by heart years ago. The sign said rest area 2 miles and my clock said please. I took it. There were no other rigs. A single sedan sat nose out near the building with a sunshade still in the windshield. As if whoever had parked didn't understand the sun was at the bottom of the world for the night. I took a slot with a view of the exit. Old habit. Always leave yourself an out. The air in the cab tasted wet. I cracked the window a half inch and it tasted wetter, like pennies. I rubbed a circle into the fog on the glass with the heel of my hand and looked. He was there, no preamble, no waiting for me to notice. Front and center of the tree line just past the first bench. The wind pushed the branches behind him in slow motion and he didn't sway. I couldn't make out anything specific, no color, no features. Just the posture of a man who knows he's being watched and isn't in a hurry to change the arrangement. I reached down, killed the interior lights so the cab became a cave and the outside jumped brighter by comparison. He didn't step out. He didn't step back. He stood as if he had all night lined up behind him, and maybe he did. I breathed deliberately, the way you do in a tight spot, and let logic have a last say. There are drifters. There are men who put their madness on like a jacket and go where the asphalt leads. There are thieves, and there are the people thieves pretend to be to make you unlock the door. I wasn't unlocking anything. I reached down, tightened the seatbelt across my lap even though the rig wasn't moving, and placed my hand on the air horn cord. It felt like a ritual and made me feel a shade better than I did without it. Minutes go differently when you are refusing to be afraid. They lengthen, they fold. Somewhere around the 10-minute mark I thought about starting the engine to wheel to a different slot, just to change the angle. That's when a newer worry landed. What if he wanted me to move? What if this was fishing and I was the fish pretending he didn't see the hook? I stayed. The rain thickened. The sedan by the building let its interior light bloom and then go out. Someone moving inside or my eyes arranging scenes without permission. I checked the mirror. He was gone. I didn't sleep. I didn't do anything but wait. 30 minutes later, I rolled out as if the tires had always been turning. 6 miles down the road, I caught the shape of a person in my peripheral and flinched. It was a mile marker leaning a degree off true. You can carry a thing like that, or you can set it down on the next mile and forget it. I wanted to set it down. The next time I stopped without planning to. It was a little turnout the map didn't dignify with a name. Locals used it to sell peaches in the summer and empty their dogs in the winter. The state had left a dumpster there and forgotten it. I took it because my eyes wouldn't stop blinking too slow, and because I was angry at the idea of fear telling me where to sleep. I pulled long ways across the lot so no car could park behind me without my mirrors telling me about it. I dropped the brake, killed the lights, and sat in a darkness that felt like a test. The trees were closer here. New growth packed in tight, ambitious. Moonlight caught on leaves like coins. I was halfway to pretending the world was empty when I heard a sound that cut the distance between a tree and a man. A cough. Not a throat clear. Not a fox bark. A cough a human makes when lungs and air argue. It came from the trees. It came again, nearer. I didn't reach for the horn this time. I reached for the door lock even though it was already down and pressed it again so it clicked against itself like emphasis. The cough didn't come a third time. Instead, there was the soft, wet sound of a foot leaving mud and finding itself again. It circled the truck the way a thought circles your head when you won't let it in. The sound kept to the edge, just outside what I could see without opening the door, just outside the halo of the mirror. I sat perfectly still because stillness is the only power you get when motion might make you pray. I don't know how long it lasted. Long enough for my breath to make a fog on the inside of the glass and for that fog to collapse back into itself. Long enough for the heater to kick in with a click like a small animal's tooth. Then silence. Then the particular quiet that follows a choice you didn't make. When I finally started the engine, the sound it made felt rude in the small world the night had become. I rolled 2 feet, 4, 10. When I turned left to get my nose pointed out, my headlights swung across the patch of dirt where the figure had walked. Prints. Not boot tread, no good. Honest waffle pattern, smooth-soled, deep at the toe, light at the heel, like someone leaning forward, hungry to be somewhere they weren't. They circled my truck. They came within 2 feet of the door and stopped and then led away into the trees where the light wouldn't follow. I should have left then. Instead, I did the one thing my future self would tell me was a flourish I couldn't afford. I put the truck in neutral, set the brake, and climbed down with the mag light. I swung the beam low and followed the first 3 prints. They were fresh enough that the edges still sagged where the mud wanted to reclaim everything. They bent around my front bumper and made a comma at the passenger side and then curved away. I put the beam out into the trees. 2 prints, then none. It was as if the ground decided not to record the rest of the sentence. A laugh came from the dark then, not from the trees where the prints went. Behind me, a single breath of sound shaped like the first half of a laugh and then killed before it could become one. I swung the light, nothing. I backed up until my shoulder touched the warm steel of the ow hood and then walked myself backward, along it until I found the ladder and climbed. into the cab without letting the light die. I locked the door again and kept the mag light standing in my lap like a candle a kid doesn't trust not to burn the house down. I left the turnout moving faster than I wanted to. Excess speed is its own kind of fear. When the interstate swallowed me again, I forced my foot to let go. I drove like that for another hour and the prints kept me company, superimposed on my windshield like a heads-up display no engineer would claim. The next day, I told myself daylight would fix it. It always does for a while. I made my drop, ate an actual breakfast at a place that still understood eggs, and found a truck stop at the edge of a town that had not yet sold its name to nostalgia. I fueled, grabbed a shower key, stood underwater too hot to be anything but medicinal, and came out with the kind of optimism you buy by the gallon. Fear shrinks when there are voices in the air and numbers on a receipt. I rolled again that afternoon with the sun off the hood and a childish idea that the night had given up on me. I held that until the sun slid and the road lost its color. Somewhere in the black stretch between one marked exit and another, a rest area sign rose up like a road angel, and I took it because my clock said, "Take it." The lot had 4 rigs scattered like chess pieces abandoned mid-game. I took a spot 2 over from a guy with a dog whose bark told me a story about cheap courage. I liked that story. I logged off and leaned back. When I opened my eyes, he was there. No lead-in, no movement. The trees at this one were older, planted when the highway belonged to men who thought cars would cure loneliness. The figure stood under them where the ground goes from maintained to wild, a step closer than he'd ever stood. Close enough that the line where his body ended and the air began refused to be as sharp as everything else in that frame. The dog 2 spots over made a noise that wasn't bark and wasn't whine and wasn't anything an owner can train out. The man with the dog said, "Shut up," and the dog shut its mouth without shutting up at all. I didn't get out. I didn't say a word. I turned on my interior lights even though it meant I couldn't see out as well, because at that point I wanted the cab to feel like a room and I needed proof of walls. I picked up my phone and checked the camera by habit, knowing it would do nothing and be nothing later. I aimed through the glass and snapped a picture. The image on the screen was the wrong kind of dark, flattened, anonymized. The figure was a smear that could have been a bush. I took another, and this time the image caught something pale again at where a face ought to be, and my thumb shivered without my permission. There's a particular kind of exhaustion where you stop negotiating with yourself. I reached across, opened the glove box, and took out the canister of gel spray that sits next to expired registration slips and a spare logbook. Gel isn't Hollywood, but it makes distance shorter. I set it by the cup holder, and that small act of staging made the night behave a little, like a child warned without words. I must have dozed. Fear and fatigue are cousins who like to surprise you together. I woke to a thump against the cab wall beneath the sleeper, the solid metal that separates you from the ground. Not a knock. Not a kick. A thump like someone had put their palm there and pressed once, as if asking the truck to forgive them for what would come next. I froze because movement confesses you are home. I waited, another thump. Closer to the steps this time. Then footsteps wet, around the front. Around the passenger side, pausing where the prints had paused the night before, except this time I could feel the pause in my chest. My breath slowed because I forced it to. The heater clicked. The dog 2 spots over made the sound again. The man said, "Jesus, Tom." And Tom did not know how to be less himself. The footsteps resumed, softer where the concrete met grass. Then nothing. I waited a full minute, then 2. I reached over and set the engine to idle. The hum ran through the frame in a way that made me feel bigger than the man outside could be. I checked the mirrors. The trees offered only their opinion. The figure was nowhere, which is the same place he always went when I wanted him to stay where I could measure him. I didn't sleep that night. I dozed in 2-minute drafts and threw them away. At dawn, the lot looked like a thing that had never been alive. The dogs stretched like dogs do when the day forgives them for surviving it. I got out because you have to get out eventually. The concrete was clean in the way a rest stop pretends to be clean at morning. Around my cab, the story waited. Muddy footprints, smooth-soled, circling, not just a loop. Circles inside circles, the way a person paces when they are trying not to leave. The prints crossed themselves near the driver door, hesitated there, then went away toward the trees and ended like a sentence you abandon because it tells the truth too quickly. I knelt and put my hand next to one, The print was broader than I wanted it to be. No drag from a limp. No unevenness that would make a person slower than I was. I stood, wiped my hand on my pant leg, and felt the child part of me ask to go home. I told it home was 4 states away and the load was due in 2. People always want to know the reveal. Was he a thief? A drifter, a ghost? A trick of cataracts you don't have yet? I called Highway Patrol that morning, not to report a crime, I didn't know which box to check, but to file a concern. The dispatcher listened with the patience of a woman who had learned to keep her tone even, so men would tell her what they thought they couldn't say. She took the mile markers, the state names, the fact that the prints were smooth-soled and more than 1 night's worth. She said she'd put a note out for units to pass by the rest areas on that stretch. She said a thing a person says when there's nothing else. Be safe. I adjusted my life in small ways that month. I stopped taking the last slot by the trees. I parked under lights even when the bugs made the light a bad choice. I learned what dogs sound like when they are trying to sound brave, and I parked near that sound when I could. I staged the gel where my hand would land without looking. I kept the mag light in the cup holder like a passenger. 3 weeks later, just when patterns learn to think they are habits, I took a rest stop in a different state and didn't think of him once until I saw him. He was on the far side of a split rail fence that meant nothing to a person, but everything to the people who insist on lines in a world that doesn't have them. He stood with the fence cutting his middle like a magic trick in the cheap part of the show. The field behind him was red dirt with weeds interested in a different future. The sun had gone down just enough to make everything 2 stops darker. He was closer than he had ever been. Close enough that I could distinguish jacket from skin, hair from air, space from the body that refused to step forward. I reached for the horn. I didn't pull it. The noise in my head was loud enough. I reached for the door. I didn't open it. The feeling in my hand said, "He wants you to." I picked up the phone and pretended to call someone who would answer at that hour with something other than, "You okay?" I watched while I pretended. He didn't move. The trick with fear is that it makes you believe in negotiation. I tried to negotiate with a man who had never spoken. I decided we were playing a game where I kept the rules and he refused them. That's how you stay in place when all your good sense says drive. He left first. He did it the way he always did. Not by moving, but by arranging the world so I could no longer say where he was inside it. The place he had been was empty. The fence was still a fence. The field was still a field. I sat another 30 minutes and then a minute after that and only then rolled. I have not seen him since. Maybe that means I changed his route. Maybe he changed mine. Maybe a deputy walked a flashlight through a stand of trees at 3 in the morning and said, "Evening." And someone who had forgotten his own name remembered it long enough to leave. Maybe nothing chased anyone. And I built a cathedral of fear on a foundation of shadows. I don't think so. The prints were real. The cough was real. The thump against the cab was real enough that sometimes I can hear it now when rain hits a certain way. What I know is this. A rest stop is not a destination. It is a pause between who you were an hour ago and who you'll be when the sun comes up. Most nights that pause is empty and clean. Occasionally something stands just inside the trees and measures you. Your power in that moment is small and absolute. You decide how much of yourself to hand over for the measuring. I still run nights. I still take the far slots when they're the safest. I still stage the gel in the holder and the light in reach. I still watch the tree line like it's a word I was supposed to look up and never did. When drivers ask me for the story, I tell it plain. A man stood where the trees began. He moved without moving. He waited without waiting. When I walked out to meet him, he wasn't there. But my truck remembered him in mud I had to step through to climb inside. If you want a rule out of it, take this one. When the lot is empty and the lights are buzzing and the wind plays with the leaves, park where your exit stays clean. Keep your feet dry if you can. And if you wake to the sound of soft footsteps circling your cab, and you feel the thin metal under your bed translate a palm press into a story your heart believes, do not open the door to make it simple. Let the night keep what it brought. Let it take what it didn't get. Roll out with the day and the dog's bark and the sound of other engines admitting they are alive. You can't stop a shadow from standing where it wants. You can keep your shape your own. That's as much as the road ever promises. The high plains at midnight can feel like another planet. The stars burn sharp, The air tastes metallic and the cold sinks into everything, steel, glass, bone. I'd been hauling frozen food out of Montana, heading southeast toward Denver. The run was simple, but the winter storm behind me kept reminding me why you don't argue with weather. Snow still streaked across the shoulders, pushed by winds that came down from the mountains like freight trains without brakes. The road stretched flat, and my eyes had that heavy grit they get after 10 hours of concentration. Coffee helped, but only to a point. The cab heater was set high enough that the windshield kept fogging, and every 5 minutes I cracked the window to let in a slap of icy air that cleared both glass and head. That's when I saw him. A figure at the roadside, standing just beyond the plowed edge where the snow piled chest high. He wasn't waving, not moving, just planted. The long beams caught him for 2 seconds. Boots, dark jacket, knitted cap. Alone in the teeth of the night, you tell yourself not to stop. A trucker's code these days is survival first. People's stage breakdowns lure you into trouble, but the thermometer said single digits and the wind cut that in half. A man standing still out there too long wasn't going to see sunrise. I took the shoulder, hazards ticking loud in the cab. Gravel crunched, brakes sighed, and the trailer swayed against the gusts before settling. The figure didn't move until I cracked the passenger door. He climbed up like he'd done it before, one boot then the other, swinging the rest of himself inside. No fumbling, no hesitation. He closed the door, tugged the belt across his chest, and buckled in with a solid click. "Appreciate it," he said, voice flat but not unfriendly. "Midwestern, maybe." He pulled off thin gloves, rubbed his hands once, then settled them in his lap. He didn't shiver. "Cold one to be walking," I said, easing back onto the road. "Truck quit on me a few miles back," he answered. "Battery's done. Cell too frozen to bother." "You headed far?" "Far enough, that was all." He looked straight ahead, profile sharp in the dim cab light. The heater hummed. Snow hissed under the tires and the highway carried us east. "I've picked up riders before. You usually get chatter. Stories about bad luck, promises to pay you back, sometimes just nervous rambling to fill the space. This one was silent. Not asleep, not tense, just calm. For half an hour, the only sound was the road. Near Douglas, I tried again. "Name's Tom," I said, tapping the wheel. He paused before answering. "Evan, you from around here?" "Used to be, that was it." He didn't ask where I was headed, didn't ask for a drop, didn't ask for food or money, just sat buckled, breathing slow, eyes on the endless line of white. The air in the cab had that strange quality, warmer than it should have been, but still carrying the smell of cold. Like wool left outside too long. I kept stealing glances. He was solid, present, as ordinary as any traveler you might pass on the street. But there was something about how still he was, how perfectly placed in the seat. That made me think of mannequins posed in shop windows. Around 3 a.m., we passed a diner I knew. Low building, buzzing neon sign, always open. I decided to stop. Coffee was dying in me and a hot plate might stretch me through the next leg. "You hungry?" I asked. "I could eat," he said without looking at me. I swung off the highway, down the crunching ramp, into the lot dusted white with snow. A pickup slumped under a drift. A couple of sedans lined the far side. I parked nose out, always ready to roll. The diesel ticked as I set the brake. "Diner's decent," I said, grabbing my jacket. "Eggs, toast? First coffee, but it's hot." I opened my door, cold slapping in, and climbed down. My boots crunched ice. I walked around the front of the rig toward the passenger side. The diner's neon flickered pink and blue across the glass. That's when my stomach dropped. The seat was empty. The passenger seat looked like no one had ever touched it. Except for 2 things. The seatbelt was buckled, tongue clicked into the latch, strap stretched neat across the empty cushion. And on the window at shoulder height, a patch of condensation clung thick, an oval fogged from breathing. I froze. My brain refused it for a full 5 seconds. I had watched him climb in. I had heard the belt click. I had listened to his voice. For 2 hours, that cab had held 2 people, and now it didn't. The belt was still buckled. Not tossed, not loose. Buckled. Like the seat had swallowed him whole and tried to hide the evidence with formality. And the condensation still pulsed faintly at the edges, fading but alive as if someone had only just exhaled. I yanked the door handle, locked exactly as I'd left it. I unlocked it, pulled it open. The interior light came on, showing nothing but empty fabric, empty floor, dry mat. No footprints, no melted snow. The buckle released with its normal metallic snap, and the strap slid back through the guide with an almost relieved hiss. I checked the lot. Empty. No figure walking to the diner, no footprints in the snow leading away. Just my rig idling under the cold and that oval fog still fading from the window. I went inside because standing outside wasn't going to give me answers. The bell over the door jingled, the heat wrapped around me, and the smell of bacon covered everything. A waitress poured coffee for a table of 2 locals in coveralls, then came over to me. "Cold night," she said. "Sit anywhere." I dropped into a booth facing my rig. She poured me coffee without asking. Steam rose, curling, fragile. "You bringing anyone in?" she asked casually. I blinked. "What makes you ask?" She shrugged. "Most times this late, if a truck pulls in, there's at least 2 sets of boots. Seen a lot of riders through here." Her words hit harder than they should have. I thought of the seatbelt, the fogged window. My mouth opened, then closed. "Just me," I said finally. She smiled without pressing, left me with the cup. Out the window, the cab sat quiet. Passenger side dark, no movement. 10 miles after leaving the diner, I passed a sheriff's cruiser angled behind a dead pickup on the shoulder. Flashers spun weak blue over the snow. The truck was half buried, hood up, driver's door wide. The sheriff flagged me to slow. I rolled the window a crack. "You the one called in about this vehicle?" he asked. "No," I said. "Been here a while," he muttered, breath white. "No driver in sight. Tracks in the snow trail out a bit, then vanish. Probably tried walking to town." "What time you think it died?" I asked before I could stop myself. "Hard to say," he said. "At least a day. Maybe 2. The cruiser's lights painted my mirrors as I rolled away, my hands locked on the wheel. A day, maybe 2. But I had picked up a man 2 hours ago who said it had died 5 miles back. I didn't sleep until I made Denver. Didn't stop again. Every few minutes I checked the passenger seat, half expecting the belt to be buckled again, the glass to fog again. It never did. When I finally parked at the depot and walked around the rig, I found nothing unusual. No footprints on the steps, no dampness on the mat. The passenger side looked like it hadn't been touched in weeks, but I still remember the weight shift when he climbed in. The sound of his gloves rubbing against each other. The low voice that said, "Appreciate it." The way he looked out the windshield like he knew exactly what he was leaving behind. You hear stories out here. Hitchhikers who vanish before dawn. Travelers picked up on dead highways who never make it to their stop. Every region has one. Some call them ghosts, some call them echoes. Most of us laugh it off because we have to, but I know what I saw, what I heard, what I carried for 2 hours across frozen Wyoming. A man who buckled in, breathed air into glass, and then left without opening the door. The road doesn't just move freight. Sometimes it carries things we don't understand, and sometimes those things ride along just long enough to remind you the cab isn't always yours alone. Now, whenever I pass a figure on a winter night, I grip the wheel tighter. I keep rolling. Not because I don't care, but because I already carried one that wouldn't leave. And I'm not sure the road lets you carry more than one. Truckers know that the strangest jobs often start at the strangest hours. Dispatch called me just before midnight. Calm, clipped instructions. Sealed trailer. Pickup at a warehouse off Route 67. Load bound for Kansas City. Nothing unusual in the voice, nothing rushed. Just another night in the logbook. I rolled in under the kind of moon that makes steel look soft. The warehouse sat squat and ugly at the end of a gravel lot, floodlights buzzing. A lone guard at the gate. He checked my papers, scribbled a note on his clipboard, waved me through. Inside, a forklift operator pointed me to Dock 4. A white trailer already waited, door shut, seal in place. My number matched. I hooked, air hissed, kingpin locked, lights tested good. The forklift guy signed my bill of lading with a grease-black thumbprint that counted as his name. "Loaded heavy," he said. "Drive safe." That was it. Paperwork tucked away, I pulled out of the lot, trailer groaning behind me, and pointed east into the black ribbon of highway. The first leg felt normal. The trailer rode steady, no sway, no bounce. Gauges told me I was heavy enough. Engine strained a little on the grades, brake pressure felt honest. Everything about it said, full load, ordinary night. I settled into rhythm. Coffee, static on the CB, headlights carving tunnels out of nothing. Towns blinked past, empty gas stations, closed diners, neon signs still buzzing for no one. 3 hours in, the DOT checkpoint lights flashed up ahead. Random inspection. Nothing you can do but pull in, log your time, pray the officer's in a good mood. I slowed onto the ramp, trailer brakes whispering, and rolled into the line of rigs waiting their turn. My turn came. The officer, tall, polite, clipboard in hand, asked for papers. I handed over the bills of lading, the pickup confirmation, logbook, insurance card. He glanced at the trailer seal. "Pop it," he said. "Sure," I answered, trying to sound casual. Every driver hates breaking a seal. It means you'll have to explain it at delivery. But you do what you're told. I climbed down, cutters in hand, snapped the metal tag and swung the trailer doors wide, empty. Not half full, not light, empty. 45 feet of echo. The light from the yard spilled across ribbed aluminum walls and bare floor, polished by wheels that hadn't touched it in weeks. No pallets, no shrink wrap, no boxes. The officer raised an eyebrow. "You running a joke, driver?" My tongue stuck in my throat. "Picked this up at midnight, Route 67, Dock 4. Forklift guy signed. Said loaded heavy." He stepped up, rapped on the trailer wall with his knuckles. The hollow boom laughed back at us. He wrote something on his clipboard. "Park it. We're calling this in." In the office, things got worse. The officer called dispatch. I sat in the corner, coffee cooling in a styrofoam cup, listening to half a conversation I wasn't invited to. Finally, he hung up. "Your dispatch says no record of this load. No assignment on your board tonight." "That's impossible," I said. "They called me, midnight, gave me order numbers, dock numbers. Paperwork matches." I pulled the bill from my pocket, slapped it down. He studied it. Numbers, barcodes, signatures that looked real enough. "This isn't in the system," he said. "Doesn't even match the format our region uses." By dawn, warehouse management had been reached. Their answer was the same. Dock 4 was empty all night. No forklift, no sealed trailer waiting, no employees scheduled. And yet I had a trailer hooked, seal broken, doors yawning wide with nothing inside. What gnawed at me most wasn't the paperwork. It was the memory of weight. The tractor had pulled like it was heavy. Brakes had felt honest. Every driver knows the difference between loaded and empty. You feel it in your chest, in the way the engine digs, and how the trailer leans when you change lanes. I'd been loaded. I would have bet a year's wages on it. So what happened to it? The officer asked the same question. "Where'd 40,000 pounds of cargo go?" "Evaporate." "You swap trailers somewhere? Sleepwalk on hook?" "No," I said, anger leaking in. That was the trailer they gave me. I've been on the road ever since. No stops but fuel. No chance to unhook. He didn't answer. Just wrote more notes, eyes flicking between me and the paperwork like one of us was lying. They impounded the trailer, hauled me off duty, told me to wait in the driver's lounge until someone higher up decided what to do. The lounge was a box with plastic chairs and a TV stuck on weather reports. A vending machine hummed. Another driver snored in the corner. I sat staring at my paperwork, trying to read it for clues. Dock 4, Route 67, signatures, stamps, all as real as anything else in trucking. But the more I stared, the stranger it looked. The fonts were slightly wrong. The barcodes were fuzzy, printed on cheap stock. The signature was just a first name, no company header. The kind of paperwork you'd accept at midnight under buzzing lights, but in daylight it looked like a counterfeit. And the seal tag, metal, stamped with numbers. I'd tossed it in my cup holder after cutting it. When I picked it up now, the digits looked random, not the standardized codes I was used to. Like the whole night had been a play, and I'd been cast without knowing it. By mid-morning, dispatch finally called me direct. The voice wasn't calm this time. It was sharp, clipped, accusatory. "You fabricated a load? Showed up with empty freight? Dot is all over us." "I didn't fabricate anything," I snapped. "You called me. Midnight assignment. You gave me the numbers." A pause. "Driver, we have no record of a call to you after 10 p.m. last night." I wanted to argue, but something in the tone stopped me. The way she said it, flat, certain, like she'd already checked the phone logs. No record, but I'd answered. Taken the notes. Driven the miles. They released me by noon, told me to deadhead back to base, no pay for the run. I argued, threatened, begged, nothing mattered. On the way back, I swung past the warehouse. Same gravel lot, same squat building, but Dock 4 was chained shut, padlocked, dusty. No forklifts moving, no guards at the gate. The place looked abandoned. I pulled in anyway. A man in a pickup waved me off. "No freight here." "Been closed a year?" I asked, knuckles white on the wheel. Yep, company folded. Nothing moves here anymore. He drove off before I could ask more. I sat there staring at the padlock, the dust on the dock doors, the weeds growing through the cracks in the pavement. A year closed, and yet 12 hours earlier, I'd rolled into this lot, signed paperwork, hooked to a sealed trailer, and hauled it east under a sky that felt perfectly normal. I don't tell this story at truck stops, not unless I've had enough caffeine or whiskey to loosen my tongue. Other drivers will laugh, call it a trick of fatigue, a memory glitch, maybe even a dream. But I know the strain in my engine, the drag on my brakes. I know what a loaded trailer feels like in my bones. I hauled weight that night, weight that vanished into nothing. The warehouse says they never loaded me. Dispatch says they never called. Dot says the paperwork doesn't exist. The trailer itself? Still impounded, empty, echoing like a coffin. So where did the freight go? Some say it was stolen, offloaded by hands faster than mine. Some say it was never there, that the mind builds stories when the body is too tired. And some quiet, superstitious say the road has ghosts of its own. Loads that replay old runs, warehouses that open for one night, drivers who pick up freight that isn't supposed to exist. Whatever the truth, I keep the seal tag in my glove box. Numbers still stamped, metal still cold. Proof that the night happened even if the world insists it didn't. Now, whenever dispatch calls me with a midnight pickup, I double check. I call back. I demand a paper trail logged in daylight, because I know what it feels like to roll east under 40,000 pounds of freight that wasn't there. And I know the road remembers things even when the system says it doesn't. There are stretches of American highway where the world feels erased. Flat plains stretch in every direction. No towns, no farmhouses, no light but the stars. That kind of emptiness has a weight to it. You feel it pressing on the cab, pressing on your chest. I was running one of those roads, long haul across the Dakotas, midnight creeping toward morning, trailer steady, CB dead quiet. The radio had gone to static an hour earlier. The phone had no bars. Just me. 80,000 pounds of steel and cargo and a line of asphalt that looked like it had been drawn with a ruler across the land. That's when I saw them. At first it was just a glow in the mirror. 2 points of white low on the horizon. Headlights far back, normal. Out here you go hours without seeing another soul. So any company feels like a relief. But relief didn't last. They drew closer. Slow and steady until they sat half a mile behind me, close enough to see clearly in the mirrors, far enough that I couldn't make out the rig itself, just the beams, twin orbs in the dark. I eased down from 70 to 60. The light slowed with me. I brought it down further to 55. They matched, never closing, never falling away. The back of my neck prickled. Convoys out here usually run tight, nose to tail, CB chatter keeping drivers awake. But the radio was dead, nothing but hiss. I keyed the mic anyway. Breaker 19, you back there? You riding with me? Nothing. Static. The lights held. For an hour, they stayed right there. When I sped up, they sped up, and when I drifted into the left lane, they mirrored. When I swung back to the right, they swung too. Always the same distance, like they were tethered. I tried tricks. Tapped the brake light sudden and hard. The glow behind me dipped in response. I cut the beams for a count of 3. Ran black through the dark, then snapped them back on. The following lights never faltered. No high beams flashed. No signals. Just those steady twin eyes burning holes in the night. The longer I watched, the more wrong they looked. Too bright for halogens, too sharp for old sealed beams. Not LED either. Just clean, white, sharp, and without color, like someone had made light itself into a weapon. The map said no turnoffs for 30 miles. No crossroads, no exits, no service roads. Just plains, grassland stretching flat and endless. I knew this road. If you weren't on it, you weren't anywhere. Still, I slowed again. Dropped all the way to 45, hazards on, forcing them to pass. They didn't. They stayed locked at that distance. No engine note in the air. No vibration on the road, just the reflection of their beams kissing the chrome on my trailer doors. By then, my mouth had gone dry. I sipped coffee, cold and bitter, and forced my eyes to the line ahead. Mirrors lie sometimes. The trick is not to let them become the whole world. Just before dawn, the eastern sky bled gray. The stars dimmed, the horizon found its edge again. I checked the mirror, still there. Twin lights steady as breath. Then, in the span of a blink, they were gone. Not faded, not turned, gone. 1 second they burned white behind me. The next, the plane stretched empty to every horizon. No glow, no trace. I braked hard, heart thudding, hazard lights strobing the frost on the shoulder. The trailer rattled as I pulled to a stop. I climbed down, boots crunching gravel, and looked back. Flat land, silver with frost. Empty black ribbon of asphalt, nothing. No dust trail. No engine hum. No red glow retreating. Just emptiness swallowing itself. I stood there 10 minutes, breath fogging, staring until my eyes watered. The wind picked up, whispering through the grass. The highway stretched behind me like it had never carried anyone else. I climbed back in and drove on. Slower now, refusing to check the mirrors for a while. 3 hours later, I stopped at a way station outside Bismarck. The officer checked my logs, glanced at my trailer seals, then asked routine questions. I told him what I'd seen, because sometimes you need another man in uniform to tell you you're not losing your grip. Lights following you out on 94? He asked, raising an eyebrow. Yeah, I said. Shadowed me for hours. Matched every move, then gone. No exits, no cutoffs, just gone. He frowned, typed something into his terminal. We had no rigs reported on that stretch between midnight and 5. Checked transponders. You were the only one logged. Maybe someone running dark? He shook his head. Not for that long. And not with no trace. You'd have picked them up on CB if they were real. His tone wasn't mocking. It was flat, matter of fact, like he'd heard similar stories before and didn't want to add his own. I rolled out of that way station with the sun high and the planes awake again. Daylight made the world honest. Fence lines reappeared, birds cut the air, towns announced themselves with billboards, but none of it changed what I'd seen. For hours, 2 lights had lived behind me, breathing with my rig, bound to my movements like a shadow that refused to break. Then they'd vanished as if they'd never existed. Every driver hears stories. Phantom convoys, ghost rigs, lost lights that trail you into dawn. You laugh at them at truck stops, swap tales over burnt coffee, pretend none of it sticks. But when you've watched your own mirrors and seen something that doesn't belong, you stop laughing. Now, when I drive empty planes in the dead hours, I check less. I let the mirrors go blind for a while, because sometimes when you look too long, the road looks back, and sometimes it follows. I was an hour past midnight on I-40 when dispatch called to reroute me. The voice came in clean through the hands-free. My name first, then the load number, then the route note in the exact cadence I've heard 1,000 times. You learn the rhythm of your own company the way you learn the sound of your truck. A real call has weight and detail. This one had both. The instructions were simple. Hazard ahead, DOT closure near mile marker 187. Divert off at 172, take County 9 west across to 281, then south back to the interstate. Acknowledged. I repeated it back because that's the law in a cab. Say it back or don't pretend you heard it. The caller thanked me by my last name, same as always. No buddy, no pal, professional. I glanced at the GPS, saw the red line blooming ahead from a wreck icon, and eased right to the lane for the exit. The night had been good so far. Light traffic, clean sky, and the hope of making Amarillo early. I told myself the detour was nothing more than one more wrinkle ironed into the job. Exit 172 dropped me into silence. 2 lanes, no shoulder, black fields pressed flat under the moon. My beams cut a narrow tunnel of white. The interstate's hum died quick behind me, leaving only the steady thrum of my diesel and the faint rattle of a pen in the console. 3 miles in, the first wrong note appeared. A barricade sat off to the side. Sawhorses with reflective tape pushed far enough apart for a car, not a rig. A hand-painted sign leaned sideways. Detour 3 Minor, a real DOT closure, uses proper boards, clean cones, official typeface. This was improvisation, but counties improvise too, and I'd seen stranger. I pressed on. The road narrowed, rolling instead of flat. GPS hiccuped, blue arrow drifting across blank fields like a ghost. I slowed to 50, then 45, another sign. Another sawhorse. This one pointed left onto gravel. Gravel under 80,000 pounds is never a good marriage. Tires bite and skate. Ruts tell stories you don't want to hear, but the reroute made sense on paper. County 9 to 281. Just a stretch of rough surface before I'd be back on asphalt. I eased onto the gravel. The trailer followed with reluctance. Dust rose in the mirrors, fogging white in my high beams. 50 yards in, I saw it. A sedan parked nose in at the tree line. Lights off, glass dark. Not unusual in itself. Plenty of cars die on county roads, but this one was angled wrong, like it hadn't been parked so much as staged. I rolled past, mirrors cutting the distance. No movement. The gravel gave way to packed dirt, smoother but silent, no markers, no reflectors. GPS still lost. Trees closed in, forming a tunnel. My beams bounced shadows against trunks that looked like bodies waiting their turn. Then the bridge appeared. Not a highway span, just old concrete over a creek. No weight sign, no railings. 50 feet, maybe less. Enough to make me wish for proof it had ever held more than farm trucks. I stopped, brakes hissing. Climbed down with the mag light. Shined the beam low. Concrete showed a patch darker than the rest, as if someone had poured repair mix without smoothing it. I tapped it with the flashlight. The sound was wrong, hollow under what should have been solid. I climbed back in, set the wheel straight, and hesitated. That's when headlights flared behind me. The sedan, the same one. Quarter-mile back, now aimed square at my trailer. My throat tightened, I eased forward onto the bridge. The concrete groaned, not loud but definite, a sound old things make when they remember what they were built for. Halfway across, movement flickered ahead. Two silhouettes stepped from behind a pickup parked at the far end. No flashers. No hazard triangles. Just there. One wore a cap, the other something reflective that caught my beam. Each lifted their arms as if shading their eyes, but their elbows bent like men carrying tools not greeting a drive. In the mirror, the sedan rolled closer. Not fast, not slow, faithful. Behind, headlights glaring. Ahead, two men at the end of a bridge. Pickup blocking the lane. No turnouts. No shoulder. I set the brakes hard enough that the tractor rocked. Air hissed. The horn cord hung inches from my hand. I told myself, options. Reverse, gravel slope, tight angle, sedan already there. Forward, men blocking, bridge groaning underweight. Stay put? Only until they decide to move first. The sedan cut its lights. The men ahead didn't wave, didn't shout, didn't claim dot. They just stood, the pickup a shadow behind them. My skin buzzed. I snapped the hazard lights on. Flipped every auxiliary lamp I had. Headlamps, cab markers, floods. The world around me lit like a stage. Trees burned white, shadows crisp. The men shifted just slightly. One raised what might have been a pry bar. The other turned his head, face pale for a split second before shadow claimed it. I grabbed a flare from the door pocket, struck it, and hurled it over the bridge. Red light hissed into the creek bed, glowing upward. The concrete underside glowed wrong, dark patch refusing to match. The sedan reversed 50 feet, slow. I laid on the horn.
Long punishing.
Sound rolled into the trees and came back thinner. The men didn't advance. They didn't retreat. They just adjusted their spacing as if waiting for me to pick the next move. I slammed into reverse. The rig crawled back, gravel crunching. The trailer drifted an inch toward the edge and I corrected by muscle memory, sweat pouring. Mirrors showed the sedan holding distance. Light still off, shape patient. Every 10 feet I hit the horn again. Every 20 I checked the flare's glow below, like it might judge whether the bridge would hold. After 100 yards, tires kissed gravel wide enough for a turn. I swung the wheel, tractor yawing, trailer threatening to cut the ditch. I forced it through, engine groaning until my nose pointed back the way I'd come. The sedan stayed put. Men ahead melted back behind the pickup. I didn't floor it. Speed gets you killed when fear already has its hand on the wheel. I held 40, then 50 until the county road spilled me back to the interstate like nothing had happened. 2 hours later, I delivered the load. Checked in, docked, unhooked. By then dawn was soft over Amarillo. Gold on the trailers. Men with clipboards yawning coffee. When dispatch finally called, the voice was real, but the words didn't fit. "We've got a note here you diverted off at 172. Why?" "You routed me," I said. "Closure near 187, County 9 west to 281, a pause. Then negative. We had no closure on that corridor tonight." My stomach went cold. "They had my load number," I said. "My name, the urgency code." The dispatcher cleared his throat. "Sometimes drivers miss here. Sometimes GPS glitches. Stay on approved routes unless instructed through the portal." I cut him off. They had the code. Silence. Then rehearsed. "We'll escalate to safety." Escalate. A word with no weight. Later I learned calls can be spoofed. Caller IDs faked. Voices cloned from a dozen seconds of audio. Someone out there had my route details, my load, my urgency code. Enough to sound like the real thing. Enough to fish a truck off the interstate onto a county bridge where 2 men and a sedan waited. Maybe they wanted the cargo. Maybe the tractor. Maybe just me. I never found out. The highway patrol wrote a note, said they'd sweep the area. The company filed an incident report. Safety sent me a PDF reminding drivers never to accept detours by phone after 9 p.m. And the men, the sedan, the wrong patch of concrete, they stayed out there, waiting for the next voice to answer the next call. Now when dispatch calls me after dark, I ask for a notice number. I ask for in-cab confirmation. If they can't give it, I hang up. Sometimes it's real dispatch. Sometimes it isn't. Doesn't matter. The rule is the same. If the night offers you a new road, don't take it. Because sometimes the road doesn't lead back.